My brother's voice came through the hidden speaker, perfectly clear. "Grandma always liked you better," he said to my mother, laughing. "But look who's sleeping in her bed tonight." I was sitting in my car in the parking garage, 2 floors below my own apartment, watching the live feed from the camera I had hidden inside the decorative clock on the mantel. My brother Marcus was stretched across the leather sofa my grandmother had shipped from Savannah 30 years ago. His wife, Diane, was standing at the kitchen island, opening a bottle of wine she had pulled from the rack I built myself. Their 2 friends, people I had never seen in my life, were taking selfies in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. They had paid $340 for the privilege of doing that. They had no idea the woman who owned every square inch of that view was watching them do it on a 5-inch screen in a Honda Civic with a cracked dashboard. I had not told my brother I was in the city. I had not told anyone. I had driven 4 hours from Cincinnati that morning with a thermos of cold coffee and a manila envelope on the passenger seat thick enough to stop a bullet. I had known about the Airbnb listing for 6 weeks. I had let it run. I needed them comfortable. I needed them confident. I needed Marcus to feel so untouchable that he would stop being careful. Careful people are hard to catch. Arrogant people hand you everything. I tapped the smart home app on my phone and pulled up the guest network. The listing showed a glowing 5-star rating, 47 reviews. Marcus had been doing this for 8 months. The math was not complicated. At an average of $280 a night and roughly 18 booked nights per month, he had collected somewhere around $40,000 from strangers sleeping in my grandmother's apartment. Not a single cent had come to me. I set the phone face down on the seat and closed my eyes for a moment. I need to back up, because none of this makes sense without understanding what my family did to me 2 years before that night. My grandmother, Vera, died on a Tuesday in March. She was 81 years old, sharp until the very end, and she had spent the last decade of her life telling anyone who would listen that Marcus was going to run through every dollar she left him before her headstone had time to settle. She was not wrong. She left him a lump sum and a firm handshake. She left me the apartment. It was a 2-bedroom in River North. She had bought it in the 90s for a price that sounds like a joke now. By the time I inherited it, the building had a waiting list and a doorman who remembered her name. She left it to me because I was the one who visited every month. I was the one who drove up from Cincinnati to take her to her cardiologist appointments and sit with her while she did her crosswords and told me stories about a Chicago that no longer existed. Marcus had not visited in 4 years. He sent a fruit basket at Christmas. The will was clear. The deed transferred cleanly. My name was on every document. I thought that was enough. I was wrong about that. 8 months after Vera died, my mother called me on a Sunday morning and told me she needed to talk to me about the apartment. Her voice had that texture I had known my whole life. The practiced softness of someone who has already decided something and is now working to make you feel like you decided it together. "Marcus is going through a hard time," she said. "The restaurant failed. You know how that goes. He just needs somewhere to land for a few months. You're not even living there, sweetheart." I was not living there. That part was true. I had been bouncing between Cincinnati and remote work contracts, finishing my CPA certification, saving money so I could eventually move in properly. I had told my family this repeatedly. I had told them I planned to be in that apartment within the year. My mother presented it as temporary. 3 months, maybe 4. Marcus just needed to get back on his feet. I said yes because I loved my brother. I said yes because I believed the word temporary meant something. I said yes because no one in my family had ever looked me in the eye and lied to me cleanly before, and I had not yet learned that people who love you are sometimes the most dangerous liars of all. I found out about the refinancing by accident. I was at work, 7 months later, sitting at my desk, reviewing a flagged escrow account for a client, when a habit kicked in. The kind of habit that builds itself quietly over years of catching people who think they are uncatchable. I ran my own name through the property records database. I do it every few months. It takes 30 seconds. I do it the same way some people check the locks before bed. The mortgage that came back was not mine. Marcus had forged a power of attorney. He had taken it to a lender in a suburb I had never heard of, represented himself as my authorized agent, and refinanced the apartment for $210,000. The lender had not looked closely enough. The notary stamp was real. The signature on the POA was not. He had pulled out $210,000 against my grandmother's apartment. I sat at my desk for a very long time after that. My coffee went cold. My computer screen timed out. The office sounds around me, keyboards, phones, the hum of the HVAC all seemed to be coming from a great distance. I kept thinking about the last time I had seen Marcus at Christmas, how he had hugged me at the door and said I looked tired and that I should come home more often, how Diane had complimented my earrings, how my mother had made her peach cobbler and we had all sat around the table like a family that had not done anything wrong. That was 6 weeks before the Airbnb listing appeared. They had not just taken my apartment. They had mortgaged it to fund whatever came next, and then rented it out to strangers to cover the payments, pocketing the overflow. I was not a person to them. I was a balance sheet item. The thing about being a forensic accountant is that grief and fury can coexist with methodology. I cried in my car for 20 minutes. Then I drove to an office supply store, bought a dedicated external hard drive, and started building the file. I did not call Marcus. I did not call my mother. I did not call a lawyer. Not yet. Lawyers file letters. Letters create paper trails that give targets time to prepare. I needed them to keep running the operation long enough for me to document every transaction, every booking, every wire transfer. I needed a record so clean that no one could stand in front of a judge and claim they did not know what they were doing. It took me 14 months. I sat in that parking garage watching Diane refill her wine glass and thought about all 14 of those months. The spreadsheets, the subpoenas. I could not file directly, but helped my attorney prepare. The forensic accountant's report on the POA signature, the printer.metadata from the forged document, those microscopic yellow dots that every color laser printer leaves behind, invisible to the naked eye, but readable by someone who knows where to look. That POA had been printed 11 months after Vera's death, on a printer registered to Marcus's home address, a power of attorney executed after the fact. That is not a mistake. That is not a misunderstanding. That is a crime with a name and a sentencing range. I picked up my phone and opened the smart home app. The guests had left 2 hours ago. Checkout time was 11. Marcus and Diane had stayed behind, which I had expected. They did this when a booking ended on weekends. They would order food, drink my wine, and sleep in my bed before the next check-in arrived Sunday afternoon. It was their apartment. In every way, they had decided to let themselves believe. I pulled up the climate controls first. The apartment was set to 68. I moved the slider. 55. The furnace in the building was central, but the smart thermostat I had installed before I gave Marcus the key controlled the supplemental heating unit in the main living space. I heard, through the audio feed, Diane say something about a draft. Then I pulled up the network settings. The public Wi-Fi Marcus had set up for guests ran through a router I had registered under my name when I originally set up the apartment. He had never changed the admin credentials. I had added a secondary hidden network during a visit 8 months ago when I drove up under the pretense of picking up some of Vera's things. Marcus had been out. I spent 40 minutes in the apartment and walked out with everything I needed. I disconnected the main network. On the audio feed, I heard Diane say, "Babe." The Wi-Fi dropped. Then I switched the door locks to manual override. Not locked, just switched. The keypad on the front door, the one Marcus had installed himself to manage Airbnb guest codes, was registered to my account. He had installed it and handed me the paperwork without reading it. I had thanked him and filed the registration under my name before he had finished pouring himself a drink. I was not going to lock them in. That was not the plan. The plan was to walk through the front door. I picked up the manila envelope, tucked it under my arm, and took the elevator up. I knocked first. Not because I had to, because I wanted to see their faces when they opened the door and found me standing in the hallway of my own home. It was Marcus who answered. He was wearing a sweatshirt I recognized from a family photo, holding his phone in one hand, looking annoyed in the way of someone who has been trying to get their Wi-Fi to reconnect. When he saw me, his face went through 3 expressions in less than a second. Surprise, calculation, and then the one I had been waiting for. The mask. "Hey," he said, like I was a neighbor who had stopped by to borrow something. "What are you doing here?" "I live here," I said. "You don't, though." He said it almost gently, stepping slightly into the doorway, so I would have to push past him to enter. "You're in Cincinnati. This is our place now. You know that. Can I come in?" He hesitated just long enough for me to understand that he was deciding whether he had options. Then he stepped back. Diane was standing in the kitchen, her arms crossed, wearing the expression of someone who had been briefed on a strategy and was waiting to see if it would hold. She looked at the envelope under my arm. Then she looked at my face. "We need to talk," I said. "We do," Marcus agreed. His voice had settled into something paternal, the tone he used when he wanted to manage a situation. Because honestly, showing up unannounced like this, that's not okay. We have a life here. You can't just... "You have 47 Airbnb reviews," I said. The room went quiet. "I've been watching the listing for 6 weeks," I said. "I have the booking history. I have the payout records. I have 8 months of transaction data showing exactly how much money you collected from guests staying in a property you do not own, using a rental platform account registered with my address." Diane set her wine glass down very carefully. "That's not," Marcus started. "I also have the refinancing documents," I said. "The full loan file, including the power of attorney you submitted to the lender. The one with my signature on it." Marcus's jaw tightened. "You're being dramatic. The POA was printed on your home laser printer," I said. "I have the forensic report. The machine identification code in the document metadata matches the serial number of the HP color laserjet registered to your billing address. The document was printed 11 months after Grandma Vera died, 14 months after the date written on the document itself. The silence after that was a different kind of silence. I had spent 14 months building toward this moment, and I had imagined it many times. I had imagined Marcus collapsing into apology. I had imagined him getting angry. I had imagined a dozen versions of this conversation in the parking garage before I came upstairs. But I had not fully prepared for the way his face shifted, the way the mask did not fall off so much as transform, reshaping itself into something harder and less familiar. You think you can come in here and threaten us, he said quietly. You don't know what you're doing. I'm not threatening you, I said. I'm telling you what I have. And I'm telling you that I called the building's management office this morning and notified them that unauthorized subletting has been occurring in Unit 414. And I'm telling you that I have an appointment with the Chicago Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit tomorrow at 9 a. Diane moved first. She crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and picked up her phone from the counter. I'm calling Mom, she said. Go ahead, I said. She called. It took my mother 4 rings to answer, which told me she had been sleeping. And when Diane handed the phone to Marcus, I heard the whole conversation, because the speaker volume was up. She's here, Marcus said. She's saying all of this. She has some kind of file. She's talking about the police. My mother's voice came through the phone like warm water over gravel. Put her on. He handed me the phone. Sweetheart, my mother said. I need you to slow down. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking very clearly, I said. Honey, you've been under so much stress. The certification, the job, everything. I think you're reading things the wrong way. Marcus and Diane have been taking care of that apartment. Do you know what maintenance costs on a property like that? They have been running that place for you. They've been collecting $40,000 a year from Airbnb guests, I said, none of which came to me. That covers expenses. It covers a $210,000 mortgage they took out against a property they don't own, I said, using my forged signature. My mother went quiet. There it was. That specific quiet. The quiet of someone who knew, not someone learning, someone who already knew and was deciding how to proceed. I want to come over, she said finally. Don't do anything yet. Let's all sit down together. I handed the phone back to Marcus. While he finished the call, I looked around the apartment. Vera's furniture was mostly still there, the heavy, beautiful pieces she had accumulated over 60 years of living. But there were additions. Diane's things. A gallery wall of prints I had never seen. A shelf of decorative objects with price tags I recognized from a home goods store I would never shop at. They had not been staying here temporarily. They had moved in. They had redecorated. They had made my grandmother's home into a backdrop for their life and a source of income from strangers. My mother arrived in 20 minutes, which told me she had already been in the city. She walked through the door in a camel coat and a worried expression, pulling me into a hug that felt like a negotiating position. Let's all sit down, she said. We sat. Marcus on the sofa, Diane next to him, my mother in the armchair that had been Vera's favorite, me on the edge of the coffee table because there was nowhere else to sit. Here is what I want, I said, before anyone could begin. I want them out of my apartment. I want the Airbnb income documented and returned. I want the mortgage addressed legally, and I want to do all of that without— You're going to destroy this family, Marcus said. His voice broke on the last word in a way that might have worked on me once. Over a piece of real estate. Over money. Do you know what Grandma would think of you right now? I know what she thought of you, I said. She told me every time I visited. His face went red. The forgery is a felony, I said. I'm not saying that to be cruel. I'm saying it because I need you to understand that I'm not the one making this serious. You made it serious when you walked into a lender's office with a document that had my signature on it and that you printed yourself. I need some water, Diane said suddenly, standing up. Sit down, I said. She looked at me. Please, I added. I'm not finished. She sat. There's something else, I said. I opened the envelope and pulled out the last section of documents. Diane, you filed for a renter's assistance grant 18 months ago, the state program for low-income tenants. You claimed to be renting this apartment from a private landlord at $1,800 a month. She said nothing. You received $11,000 in assistance over 13 months, I said, while simultaneously co-managing an Airbnb operation generating $4,000 to $5,000 per month from this same address. I set the documents on the table. You can't be a low-income tenant and an unlicensed short-term rental operator in the same apartment at the same time. The state calls that grant fraud. My mother stood up. I need everyone to calm down, she said. This has gone far enough. We are a family. We do not do this to each other. They did this to me, I said. I am responding to what they did. You're being vindictive. I'm being accurate. She looked at me with the expression I had grown up with. The one that said I was being unreasonable. The one that had worked every other time. The one that had kept me quiet for long enough that my brother had managed to forge my name, collect $40,000, and refinance my inheritance without consequence. Mom, I said. I love you. But you knew about the refinancing. She opened her mouth. You called me 8 months after Vera died and you told me Marcus needed a place to land. You had already spoken to him. You already knew the plan. I don't think you knew about the forgery. I'm choosing to believe that, but I need you to stop standing between me and the truth right now, because the truth is on paper, and it does not require your permission. She sat back down. For a long moment nobody spoke. Then Marcus leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Not anger, not the mask, something older and more exhausted. I'll give it back, he said quietly. The Airbnb money. I'll figure out the mortgage. Just don't go to the police. The police are already involved, I said. He looked up sharply. I reported the unauthorized subletting this morning, I said. It's on record. A detective from the Financial Crimes Unit is going to call me tomorrow whether I go in or not. I paused. But what happens after that call depends on what I tell them. Diane stood up again. This time I did not tell her to sit. She walked toward the hallway, and I thought she was going to the bathroom, but she stopped at the coat rack near the door. I watched her on the feed from the clock camera, the small screen in the corner of my phone still running. I watched her reach into her coat pocket. I watched what she did next. She walked back into the living room and sat down and did not look at anyone. I stood up and crossed to the coat rack in 6 steps and reached into the pocket of my jacket, the one I had hung there when I arrived. There was a small Ziploc bag in the pocket. A white powder. I held it up. The room was very still. That camera, I said, pointing at the decorative clock on the mantel, has been recording since I walked in. Diane's face drained of color. The timestamp will show exactly when I hung my jacket and exactly when you stood up and walked to the coat rack and reached into your coat, I said. And exactly what you put in mine. I set the bag on the table. I am a CPA with a federal contractor clearance. I have had 2 background checks in the past 3 years. If you would like to test me, I will get tested. Tonight. Right now. And when the results come back clean, that footage goes to the detective as evidence of an additional crime. Marcus turned and looked at his wife. I had imagined this moment too, in a vague way, the possibility that they would try something when they realized how completely they were caught. I had not known what it would look like. Now I did. It looked like a woman who had just run out of ideas sitting very still on a sofa that did not belong to her. I'm going to make this simple, I said. I want you both out of this apartment by end of business tomorrow. I want Diane's coat left on that rack, because I am going to let the detective decide what to do with what's in the pocket. And I want my mother to hear me say this clearly. This apartment goes back in the condition it was in. Vera's things stay. What you added, you take. Marcus stood up slowly. You're destroying us. You destroyed yourselves, I said. I'm just the one watching it happen. My mother picked up her coat from the armchair. She looked at me for a long moment. Her face was doing something complicated, cycling through expressions too fast to name. I hope you know what you're losing, she said. I know what I already lost, I said. I lost the brother I thought I had. I lost the 2 years I spent believing that the people who raised me were not capable of this. I lost the version of myself that would have sat here and apologized for bringing this up. She walked to the door. I did not stop her. The detective called at 8:45 the next morning, 15 minutes before our scheduled appointment. I answered from the kitchen of the apartment, standing in the spot where Vera used to make coffee, looking out at the same skyline she had looked at for 30 years. I told him everything. I walked him through the file. I sent him the documents electronically before the call ended. He asked me 3 times if I was sure about the forgery, and I told him 3 times that I had a forensic accountant's report from a certified document examiner, and that the metadata did not lie. Marcus was arrested on a Tuesday. 2 weeks later, Diane was charged separately for the grant fraud. Her attorney negotiated a repayment agreement that will take her 7 years to complete. The mortgage was unwound after a 4-month process involving the lender, my attorney, and a circuit court judge who looked at the forensic report and the timeline and described the situation as one of the more transparent fraud cases she had reviewed in recent memory. I moved into the apartment on the 1st of November. I kept Vera's furniture exactly where it was. I took down Diane's gallery wall and patched the holes. I put Vera's framed photographs back on the shelf above the fireplace. The ones Marcus had moved to a box in the closet because they did not fit the aesthetic he was marketing to guests. I lined them up along the mantel and stood back and looked at them. My grandmother at 22 in a yellow dress. My grandmother and her husband on the roof of this building the year they bought it. My grandmother at 80, sitting in this exact living room, laughing at something off camera. I made coffee and stood at the window. The city was gray and bright at the same time, the way Chicago is in November. The lake somewhere out beyond the skyline, doing whatever the lake does when the season turns. I held the mug in both hands and thought about all the people who had stood at this window over the years. The strangers who had paid my brother to borrow this view for a weekend. The grandmother who had earned it over a lifetime. I thought about my mother, who had not called since the night in the apartment. I did not know yet what that silence meant. Whether it was guilt, or grief, or anger, or something that did not have a name. I did not know if we would find a way back to each other. Some things that break do not mend. Some things that mend are never quite the same shape. What I knew was that this was mine. Not because I had fought for it, though I had. Not because the law said so, though it did. Because a woman who loved me had looked at a skyline she had watched for 30 years and decided that I was the one she wanted to leave it to. She had known something about me. Some quality of attention or persistence or plain stubbornness that made her believe I would hold on to it. She was right. I opened the folder on my laptop, the one labeled with the case number, the one that had held 14 months of documentation, every forged signature, every suspicious transfer, every Airbnb booking receipt, every entry in the long ledger of what my family had cost me. I held down the delete key until the folder was gone. The apartment was quiet. The lake was out there somewhere, invisible and enormous. I picked up my coffee and went to sit in my grandmother's chair.